Hi, welcome everybody to this new webinar from Freshworks. As you might notice, the setup is completely different than with previous webinars. Today we have two guests, Martien Verment and Nienke Bloem. Martien Verment is an AI specialist and is a founder of Verment Consulting. Then we have Nienke Bloem, who is an absolute authority in Europe when it comes to customer experience and is one of the 8 individuals worldwide who can train professionals for the renowned CCXP exam in the world. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Let's start with the basics. When is for you customer experience successful?
Well, shall I start with that one? I think customer experience can be successful from 2 lenses. Of course, first you're going to start with the customer. Is your customer experience, your interactions, your products, your services as you want them to be? So are they effective, easy and enjoyable? That's the 3 E's that we often use. So that's from a customer lens. But you can also be successful in customer experience management from an internal perspective. And then you're much more looking at employee experience. Are you helping your employees to deliver great customer experience? And are you making them able to, are they willing to? So that's, you can look at it through 2 lenses, but I'm going to be honest, companies that get the inside-out perspective right often get the outside-in perspective right too. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, that's really true. There are 2 perspectives, and what I think is really important to get it right is if you look at the details. So a lot of organizations have people working and saying, well, we should do this, or we should have these processes, or this customer journey. But the organizations I see that are doing it very well, they immediately go to the details. So you can dream big and take little steps, but you have to take enough little steps and have attention for the details to do it right with your employees, with your processes, but also with your technology, because there's a lot of stuff you can buy to enhance customer service, customer experience, but it's really important that you look at all the details to see that you really buy the right stuff and implement them the right way. So there's a lot of lessons learned in that area.
That's great. So now we talked about perspectives and about the details, but what concrete conditions actually need to be fulfilled? Can we go into detail?
Well, of course, we're talking about AI, and I think it's very important, but for me, tooling and all these kinds of ideas that you have to help digital technology enhance your customer experience, for me, I think, especially being a 5-year an entrepreneur in this field and 3-year a leader before that, what I see more and more is that the fundamental elements are missing. So it's more like, who do we want to be as a brand? So when you deliver your experiences, what do you want them to be? I often say great customer experience don't happen by accident, because if they happen by accident, much more are worse customer experience. So I think you should really look at the fundamental part. What customer experience do you want to deliver at what moment? And then do reverse engineering to get the details right in the planning. And when you ask companies, I think it's a great question maybe for the people that are watching, what are the experience we want to deliver? What fits our company? And if you can answer them, you're on the road for winning.
Yeah, looking at what you need to do is that in the field of AI, you talked about the AI, there's lots of different people involved in doing that right, or at least doing it. So it's not just the managers or the people or the technology department. There's also a lot of new skills that need to be adapted, because AI technology, nobody has the business case yet. Nobody has it in their IT roadmap. So you have to change a lot of ways of working to make it work. And what I see is if you want to increase customer experience, artificial intelligence can really help. Because a lot of the technologies within artificial intelligence are designed to do that. But I also see a lot of organizations implementing very bad chatbots because they want to do it themselves, for instance. And then they don't involve the right people or the right skill of people. And that's really a shame. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Now, before we go to the AI part of this webinar, because in the end it's the means for successful customer experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are most pitfalls companies face today when it comes to customer experience?
Yeah, if you look at that, there's of course a list. You can look on the web and you can say, hey, what goes wrong? And if you measure it, it's first you start, what is really wrong? Is that a customer giving you a mediocre figure, or is it a lot of customers giving you a bad figure? So if you look at the NPS, there's a lot of people saying I want the NPS score, but there's also a lot of organizations looking, I don't want any detractors. I don't need so many ambassadors, I just don't want any detractors. So if you say what are the pitfalls of what's really right, then setting the right KPIs for your organization is really important. And then I think the next one is that there's always mistakes in customer service, in customer interaction. So there's maybe 80 or 100 KPIs that you need to manage all day to get it right. And so there's never a day where everything goes right. So what I see is that customer organizations that go a little bit lazy, saying, well, it's okay now, they gradually lose a lot of their touch. So you need to be always innovating. And that's, I think, the two main things that you need to focus on.
Perfect.
Well, what I really like what you said about NPS, or whether it's CSAT, I'm going to be honest, choose a KPI, the major one, and have your KPIs amongst that to get your good, to measure right and to know where you're heading. But what I'm really interested in is what are people heading for? So what is it that you want? What I really like the perspective is what you're saying when we have, for example, NPS, and we're going to go for, a lot of organizations don't really have a goal or a mission how to get there, a strategy how to get there. Like, are you going to go for a detractor, or what we call a tail cutting strategy, or are you focusing on the ambassadors? It's really important because when you know what you want, then you can steer that way. So if you are going for, we want raving fans, what I sometimes see on websites in mission statements, all right, if that's what you want, you have to work on wow experiences and creating real detailed, brilliant, fun elements where you get fans from. If you're more focusing on gradually growing and being a better, player in the customer experience field, you're much more, making sure that people don't get disengaged. So you have to work on the detractors. So it's very interesting. What are you going for? And that is, are you going for sales? Are you going for service? Are you going for, and of course you can put some elements in, but internally employees cannot understand some stories that are told. What are we going for? What is our dream or our perspective where we're going for? I would really add that. I think that's it would be smart if you do that.
Yeah, and that's also something that I like to add. We have now a labor market where it's not very easy to get people and to keep them. And what you see is that if people are not engaged, if the employees are not engaged and they come in and they go away in 12 months, then it's really hard to deliver on what your goal is. So a lot of the employee engagement, I think, is almost more important than the customer engagement in the coming years because of the labor market and the difficulty of getting the right people to do the job.
Perfect. Yeah. Now, a question to the audience before we move on to the AI part of this webinar. A question for the audience. Has your company already implemented artificial intelligence applications, or are you considering to do so? Let me give you 10 seconds to answer, and then we can move on. All right. So this is very interesting. 63% says yes, they have already implemented AI applications, and 38% says no.
Well, that's consistent with the research. Forbes Institute did a research last year, and they say about 13% has not implemented anything, and about 30% has implemented AI for multiple causes. And then, of course, there's a ladder to go from that, saying we have a prototype, we have implemented for just one implementation. So the 38%, I think, is consistent with the growth, of course, in the market that is expected, but also what Forbes research numbers were.
And I also think it's very interesting, what is AI? So then you can have a conversation, are we working on AI? Does that mean that we need to have a very complicated chatbot, or that we have to have wearables? So it's also very interesting. I think a lot of organizations are working on kind of artificial intelligence in there. So it's always very interesting. So maybe people can be a little bit more proud to see what they're already doing. although in our preparation was that a lot of organizations should also be a little bit ashamed because they're not creating the traction they should.
Sure.
Yeah, especially when you compare other countries.
Yeah, and what you also, that's an interesting point, because AI a couple of years ago was something really out of the ordinary, and now it becomes more ordinary. And what you also see is that organizations promote software and they say it's AI. And there was another very interesting article, and you can find information online, that a lot of organizations are now saying we use AI in our products. Well, in actual, they don't. Yeah. So artificial intelligence has a couple of technologies based where it's based on, and for us, for customer experience, that's three. That's three different kinds of techniques, which is machine learning, natural language processing, and emotional analysis. And those three, one of those should be in there. Otherwise, it's not AI, and then it's a marketing trick.
Yeah.
So the question has already been a bit answered. Where would you put Europe in AI adoption? Definitely in the field of customer experience compared to other countries, like for example compared to the US or to is Europe or North Europe like a front runner?
No.
Or somewhere in the middle?
No. I was last year in the States, this year in the States, and a colleague of mine just visited China. I was there 2 years ago. We are lagging. Let's be honest. So and maybe we don't have enough people, so the urge is big enough, or the burning platform is big enough. But about a year and a half ago, I was in the States. They opened a water park, and you got, as a start, everybody got a wearable. Nothing, and you can book your rides and stuff. So the artificial intelligence is going further and further. When you go to Disney Park, when you do your booking. I think they're leaders. So it's very interesting to see what's happening there, and especially when you look in China, what's happening with Alipay, with everything that's going on there. Sometimes a little spooky maybe, but when you're looking from a technology perspective, it's very interesting.
And digitalization is not AI, so you have to really see some things are digitalized, but they're not used for artificial intelligence purposes. If you look at the Netherlands, and I talked to one of the professors of the University of Enschede, especially in the Netherlands, we're lagging behind. And that's because our companies are not going as fast with research funds and everything than the scientists at the university would like it to be. So we have a lot of great scientists in the Netherlands who can do things, who can program things, who are creative. But instead, if you compare it to the US, there's a lot of more organizations saying, hey, we want to do something new. Let's go to a university, find a couple of good people, and then implement something. And here we're lagging really behind. So if you want to see what can be done or what you need to be, you have to go to the US at least. And in China, there's a lot of AI run by the government, but a lot of companies are more digitalizing, but then they use this digital information for processing and not really for the AI part yet.
And what I find really interesting is a lot of people go to the USA. So I think the boards of those companies that we're talking about have all gone to Silicon Valley, have either gone to China. And I think that's really good. And then they start experimenting a little bit, and the results are maybe not that big, but it's also because the people are not used to it. Those people that have to implement it have not been to Silicon Valley. So I think it's very interesting that starting at the experiments or the minimal viable product or prototypes, just the way that the language is used within companies, the scale up is going too slow. So those experiments are there, but there's a lot of frightening things. Shall we do it? Maybe it's not good enough. So, and you need to, when the experiment is done, that's when the magic should start to happen. And a lot of people put the budgets in the start for the MVP. And then
I think in general, if you look at the Netherlands or you look at Northern Europe, in the IT department, and I've been IT director for Wacom, for instance, there's a lot of statics in the budget. You have a 3-year plan, you have a 5-year plan, and then to do something disruptive. Even the term disruptive is disruptive. So, and in other organizations, let's say in the US, they have kind of a research fund to do crazy things. And in Europe, we have a different management view. So we don't do crazy things that easy. And also, if you always talk about the examples of doing great things, doing completely different things, it's always the US or the UK where they started something crazy and then So having a tennis table in the office, that's Google, you know, and then we adopt it. So we're behind.
Well, there are some nice examples, but it's lagging. And what I find also interesting is what I see a lot within companies is that when they make the business case, it has to be earned back within a year. And that's not possible. So those
sometimes
business
it
cases,
is, but sometimes
often not.
No.
So I think you need a little bit of a longer perspective and to see the wider range, maybe what you're losing when you're not doing so. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. So again, some examples have been given.
Yeah.
For example, the wristband.
Yeah.
But what are other tasks that in general have already been adopted? So
well, maybe an example. I had an airline ticket and I wanted actually to change it because something happened at my home front, so I wanted to go home early. I looked up. I didn't really know what kind of a ticket I had. That's not really clear from a customer experience perspective. You're like, I don't know. So I tried to look it up in the environment that I could do myself as a frequent traveler, but I could not find it. And I put it on Facebook where they had I thought that I was chatting with somebody. So I put in my question, put in my booking type, and I send it in. And then I got the normal answer, go to that website and then you can look it up. No, I already did so. So it was more a chatbot that just had my question. If they would have added AI, they would have seen I already looked it up. Then I posed my question and then you put me through to an agent because maybe AI could not fix it, or probably they could. But it was very interesting. So I think there are lots of situations where AI could be, and especially when you look at customer research, when you look at speech analytics, when you look at text analytics, well, a lot of companies are sending out surveys that they might not have to do because the information and the magic, well, not only data, but information is already there.
Yeah, so you have to take a look at the difference between digitalization and then big data and artificial intelligence, and they're not the same. So if you say what kind of experience customers might have with artificial intelligence in customer interactions, then of course chatbots, but then not the chatbot that just does the question answer, but the one that looks at sentiment and context. What's also interesting is, and that might maybe build on your example, if you go to an airline and you go to the customer service, then about 30% of the questions to change your ticket are not about changing your ticket. They're about other things. And then if you get a lot of emails, you can have an AI program read the emails and direct them to the right queues. So a lot of people are helped sooner. Those are the things that are examples that are already right now here. And then, of course, through natural language processing, you can do immediate translating to another language. And so there's lots of stuff that you can do. And what you said for customer service queries, you can also do customer service surveys. And then during the conversation with the customers, the system already knows what kind of CSAT score the customer is going to give. But it can also determine how good the people are, the agent is and giving tips on the screen at the moment that the customer is already on the phone with them and still on the phone with them. So there's lots of different examples.
Yeah, I visited a contact center and was very interested that they had kind of a software where the conversation was analyzed during, and with the words that the customer used, they gave a kind of a type, so a kind of a persona, so the agent knew what kind of words to use to really make the connection, make it personal, and they trained the people behind to know what kind of words could they do. So that's really when digital becomes human. I really like that, where they helped the agent to have a better conversation. In that way, they help the customer to grow the customer experience. So those kind of things you see, and they make me happy because as an expert, I'm like, yes, this is what it helps the employees and it helps the customer. So that's the win-win you want.
Yeah, definitely. I think again we're running ahead on the next question. Actually.
Oh well, that's what we said. No worry, no.
So because previously we also talked about the pitfalls in customer experience that companies are facing. So again, like how can AI be leveraged on the pitfalls that you mentioned earlier? How can this technology be leveraged to solve these issues?
Well, one of the things, if you look at sentiment analysis, it's not so easy to understand what customers are really saying if they, for instance, are cynical. If they write what a great service with then a computer that is not using sentiment analysis would say, well, thank you very much. So cynicism is a very good way if you want to do email improvement to see if you can use artificial intelligence to overcome those things. What's also interesting is to see that some of the customers are not so digitally included as others. So some people are struggling to do things online, to do self-service, but there's a lot of people that can use or can benefit from using apps in the healthcare or measuring their blood pressure or getting results to doctors. And what it can do then is help the person to go through the stages. To say, well, now you need to do this, and now you can do this, and looking at the context. And those are the things that I think will really change the customer experience if these helping programs, it could be a chatbot, it could be a voice chatbot. You will now have in a couple of years the emotional bots where people just talk to and they say, hey, you're upset. And then help people through the process. So I think that's a great way to improve the customer experience. But that's not just there yet. Maybe in experience, but not mainstream in organizations used yet.
Yeah. A question actually again to the audience. The second question is, what is the feedback of your customers about your AI solutions like your FAQ or your chatbots or any other technology that you're using? It's most for the people who responded earlier that they're already implemented their chatbot. So far, the responses have been okay, so not too enthusiastic. Do you have any idea why that is the case? Like that the responses haven't been too optimistic yet to our audience and the usage of their artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I know for one thing from the research that we did last year in the Netherlands, that people using a chatbot, that the chatbot success rate in a lot of organizations that are using it for the first time and designed it themselves is about 50 to 60%. That means that 40% of the time you do not get the right response. There's organizations that have been working to deliver chatbots as a service already for 10 years. But a lot of those self-made chatbots, and I'm really very adamant about this, are really bad. And the problem is that if we do this as a group of organizations or maybe as the complete sector, then our customers will say, hey, 10 times I ask a question, 6 times I get a right answer, 4 times I get a bad answer. Just ditch this technology. So I said last year, it's really, really important that we get across the message. If you have a chatbot that doesn't have a success rate above 80%, then you have a bad one. And that's a harsh conclusion, but it's true. And I know it can be done because I've worked with organizations that have a success rate of about 92, 94%. But if it's below 80, you should really, really work on it to get it to an 80% success rate.
The bar is actually very high when you hear 80%, right?
Well, but why do you want to give your customers the option of a chatbot that's bad? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Why do you want to let FAQs, chatbots, most of them are a jungle? You get in and you have no clue because they're often inside out organized. So they should be much more outside in organized. What are questions of customers and especially how do they Google? So what kind of words do you type in? Most organizations have no idea really what customers are using for kind of words. Also when you type elements. So those things, and I think if your chatbot and 80% I think is the bar, why would you offer crappy solutions to your customers? I don't know.
No.
If I would have a bakery store and I would give my bread would be like, well, if 70% is good.
Yeah, no, it's right.
I think you're doing a bad job. So maybe, I think the ambition can maybe be a little bit higher.
And we don't accept it from the people. So if you have an agent and
Yep.
you say, hey, you give 10 answers and 6 are right, we don't do that. But if we have launched a chatbot and we made it ourselves, then we're really happy. And that's really one of the messages that I want to get across. That's not right.
But what I'm really curious, because I think this making it ourselves or have other or buy technology. What's your, if you would have to choose?
I don't care as long as it's good.
Okay.
So if you want to buy something, use a company, that's fine. But if it's better and faster, then do it. If you want to do it yourself, fine, but then don't launch it.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I think, get the message, and now they have to start working on it.
That's very interesting.
I hope we didn't lose too many people in
No,
the webinar,
no,
because
no,
we are a little bit...
We're a little bit harsh.
But it's a bit of homework.
Yeah.
When,
Yeah,
when
it
the
is.
response is
Well,
okay, right?
maybe the question is, what success rate does my chatbot have?
Yeah.
And you should know the answer.
Yeah, definitely. Then another big improvement in retail, at least, that artificial intelligence offers, is a higher degree of personalization to customers. Like, what are steps that actually the audience can implement already tomorrow in order to make this happen?
One of the things that's really important is personalization. You have two big trends actually in customer experience. One is the personalization, emotional kind, and the other is the digitalization. And when you put it together, that's really strong. What you can do tomorrow is think about applications, software that help the interaction with the example that you gave, the buzzwords. It could also help during a conversation if you do speech analytics to say what is the customer really saying, what are the problems about, and improving the problems. And what you see in artificial intelligence, that in the first years it's going to help the agents. And then after a couple of years, it's going to do stuff themselves. So the whole personalization is not really easy for people. So if you have artificial intelligence improving that, enhancing that, I think that can be done tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think it's the digitization in combination with AI. Yes. I was speaking at the Customer 19, an event 2 weeks ago, and also Mark van der Vlies from KPN, he presented a case where they used AI digitization, where they helped the employees in the stores and in the call centers to help their customers in a better way. So they found... they help them is if they ask for this, you can go this step. So they really enabled employees by using artificial intelligence, by seeing who the customer was. But because let's be honest, your CRM should be in order. If you don't know who your customer is, you cannot personalize. So I think that's a very important step. That's like a fundament. And in that way, they increased sales 60% in this part. So they helped the agents on the phone and in retail stores. I think that whole element of helping, because in retail, especially retail that's in stores, of course you have retail online, but if you work on the in-store part, that is where you have to recognize your customer, that you could do it with beacons, so you can recognize them, especially, well, there's a big conversation about the Wi-Fi stuff. But if you recognize people, make sure that you act on it, because people like to be recognized. And when you look in retail more in the digital part, so more in the online, the example I really like is bol.com, where they used how can we get better content to our potential customers based on their interests, and not only what's good for them, but also really good for the customer. So I like that win-win. Yeah.
So the next, again, a question to the audience. We will give you a theorem, and you have to say whether or not you agree with it. The theorem is AI is rather used to reduce costs than delivering a great service to the customers. Agree, don't agree, or don't know?
Well, that's an interesting question.
What do you see before people are they're just answering?
The audience says 100% don't agree.
So they say cost.
So it's no, it's actually for rather for delivering a great service to the customers. So.
Yeah, that's also what I see. And then to try to deliver a better customer service, and then when it works, you can increase, you can enhance, and drive costs down. But to put in artificial intelligence as a cost saver, even in a chatbot, which is already beginning to grow in organization numbers, that's not the first thing to do. No.
Oh, great. And then we have a second theorem for the audience. And the question this time is, most of our artificial intelligence projects fail. Agree, don't agree, or don't know?
Now we need their honesty.
Here it's more mixed. So nobody agrees with agree.
So most fails, yeah.
So there is 14% who says don't agree, and 86% don't know. How would you...
Well, I like the don't know because I like the honesty. A lot of times these projects are started and there's not a start where they define success. So when is this project a success? And whether it's AI, but AI I think you should be very specific. When is it a success for us? For example, you need 80%, or we need so many percent of our questions should be handled by our technology, or we don't want to send so many surveys, or we need a better NPS. I think you should really be specific. What KPIs do we want to be successful? Because you can do a lot of projects, but if you never define when you want it to be a success, you don't know. Yeah.
And then, like, what are, we already discussed it a bit, like, what are your tips that you see in practice to make your AI projects work? So you already said, like, the 80% satisfaction.
So you have to have the goals. That's what Nienke says. What's also important is what I said, you need to have a different set of people, and they have a lot of different competencies. The third thing that I see when I'm involved in AI projects and getting it done is that you have waves of difficulty. So first you have the wave to start it, to say, well, we get enough traction in the organization to get permission to start it. Then you start experimenting, people are really happy, and then some of the things do not go right. And then you have to have a second wave of energy to say, hey, we're gonna try and try and try again. So endurance is a very important one, and of course it's new technology, so you don't know who you need on the programming side, but nothing goes by itself. And the last one is you need bucket loads of good data. So if you don't have the data, or it's not of the right quality, then you can't do the analysis, it's never going to work. So there's also a lot of preparation work done before, and that you cannot skip, but that some people are very anxious to skip because they want to start with the experimenting.
Of course.
Yeah, for me, I was thinking, and as a speaker, I always like stories, and I was thinking, what is it that you would make it work? And I was thinking more of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So I was really thinking, actually, you should start as two of the Seven Dwarfs. Gonna be honest, you have to have Doc and Happy. The other one's the grumpy and stuff. Well, but take those two. Doc is the one who has the data, who's structured, who takes the lead, and the Happy, you should have somebody who's optimist, who tries out new things. Those two elements you should have in your project. Then they're dwarfs, they're small. Start small. Start small. Don't try everything. Start with in a company and in a kind of an experimental way. They have this bag with this little sachet on the back. That's where your money should be in. They should have money. No AI projects without money. And then you should have suddenly Snow White comes by, and then you have a project. And then you're going to start. And sometimes things go wrong, but sometimes the prince comes by. And so I think you should start small, have some elements of project planning, leadership, and happiness, have the money, and have the goals and dream big. Just continue, work. So I really like those elements when you start on that.
Well, that's great. Now, a big question, a big picture question. Are jobs under threat in customer service?
No and yes.
Now, that's what my answer was too. Yes and no. Are you going to do the yes?
No, you're going to do the no.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. In a sense that very simple questions, very simple interactions can be done, can be prevented even, so they don't arise. So in that way, work will go away. Will jobs go away? Well, that's very different, because if the simple tasks are automated or prevented, then you will still need people doing the complex jobs.
Yeah, and I think the complex part, but also a lot of companies are turning it around and they say because all this digitization using AI, we are losing contact with our customers. So they want somehow to have that connection with people. I visited Zappos this year. For many people, well known when it comes to customer experience. They make it their special element, their customer service part. Doesn't mean they're not good in the online AI elements, but they create those moments that last. So yes, work will go away. No, jobs will not.
Yeah, and it's also important to realize if you do this for customer service leaders, if you have some degree of losing the work or savings, then I think at least 50% of those savings you should give to the CFO, otherwise he won't be happy. But the other 50%, keep it in customer experience. Use it to implement something else, to invent something else. And a lot of organizations, I can see the finance department or the CFO saying, hey, that's a nice saving, give it all to me. And then the people in service are, because they're service orientated, okay, well, yeah, I have less context. But maybe you can elong context to make them better, or call customers that are not calling you or whatever. So there's also a lesson in there to say, if you have some savings, don't give everything away, but create new jobs, create new opportunities.
Well, that's great. And then one last question, as we already discussed actually how the situation is right now in the industry. Where do you see the customer experience / AI industry moving?
If you look at the numbers, I'm only going to do the numbers so you can do the rest. It's a market in 2016 of about $8 billion. And in 2020, it's about $50 billion market on AI in customer experience. So it's a huge growth. So if you say, where are we going? I wouldn't know what it's going to be in 2023, but it's not declining. So there's billions and billions of dollars going around. And I think it's a very, very interesting market because I've been in customer service for 20 years and we talked about routing and we talked about CRM. But this technology is really, really, really new. And it's a big revolution in how to deal with customers. So I think we should really jump on that train.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the technology and where it's going, but I also think customers are waiting for it, and not only people are like and I'm gonna bring in my family situation. My daughter, she's 20, she doesn't want to call anybody, and she's not the only one within her friends. So you have to enable that. But my parents, they're almost 75, and they are also digital savvy. So when my mother looks up stuff for her pension, she goes to the digital environment and she needs to be helped. But my mother, when you don't give her an answer, she will call you. My daughter, when you don't give an answer, she'll go away. And that's a very different perspective. So, but what we see, for example, when I looked up research in booking a hotel 15 years ago, you would go to a traveling shop or maybe there was a little bit online. Now a lot goes online, but what you also see is people need digital assistance. And that's 11% needs digital assistance. And that's where AI is going to help as digital assisting. So I think it's going to go into that. So customers want it. But what you also see, what I see as a trend is that in AI projects is that there's much more customer co-creation. So they're not an internal project and then we launch. In the phases in it, we ask customers, what do you think of this? How do you use it? We do a lot of user experience testing where you see eye tracking. What are they doing? What kind of emotions? What are they doing in their face? I'm even seeing research where the people have these hats on where you see the brain moving. So you can see what are emotions when people are using words. When you have that information, you can transform it to next levels. So I really like that because that's where you start with the customer first and help the customer experience. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And we'll round up. Thank you, first of all, the audience for joining us today. And thank you, our wonderful audience, Martien Verment and Nienke Bloem, for joining us for this webinar today. I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope to see you all in one of our future webinars. Bye.